So, do we change hearts and minds of the masses or do we vote some new politician in office? Well, this is something that I've talked a lot about on my channel and about how, well, we need to educate the masses of the public. We're not actually supposed to um, participate in political rituals, go vote for the next person that we think is going to represent the people, or pass some new law that we think is going to make society better, even though it's still not good to begin with. And so we try to make things better. We try to lower government, but it never seems to get lower. It actually seems to increase. And then we never wonder why, because we never question statism. I'm going to put these questions on the screen for you just to get this out of the way for this video. If you've never heard of these concepts, these are sort of prerequisites to what I'm going to be talking about in this video. Because what I'm going to be talking about in this video is sort of spiritual requirements around these topics and around these other notions that most of my audience is already mostly familiar with. So get yourself familiar with these ideas and these questions, think about them honestly for yourself, and we're going to be moving into the next topic, which is again materialism versus changing minds and hearts. Because let's face it, government, laws, people, and events, these are material ideas, or at least they're not the most spiritual, philosophically enlightening. Like, we're just here to educate people. No, if a politician gets on stage, they're asking for your vote. They're asking for you to do something, give them money, vote for some new law. It's asking for some material thing or some identity. They put themselves up in this special outfit. They have to say certain things and sound smart, or people look up to them and they have to fulfill some sort of identity in their own heads. It's all very material based. And you have a lot of egos going around as well. This person that has an identity of their self saying, well, I'm looking for somebody with this in their self because I'm missing that within my own life. Now, someone else might disagree with that, but they don't care because they think they should just vote for themselves, regardless of the other person. But they have to realize they live in the same reality as them. So if they want to vote for a politician who's going to use violence to impose their will on their fellow man, I mean, if they wouldn't commit violence themselves and they recognize violence is wrong, it doesn't matter who does it. It doesn't matter if you can vote for it. Nothing will ever make it right. Violence is always wrong. And so these are some of the ideas we always talk about, but that concept of violence, the concept of actions and morality and philosophy is not at all materialism. Now, it can stray to an extreme, that being said, of knowledge. I've talked about the dangers of knowledge in another video of mine and the dangers of attaching ourselves to ideologies and ways of thinking, but they usually become most dangerous when you start attaching material fixations to them, saying, well, we have this really good idea, but we need to make sure that in order for this idea to manifest, we pass it through law, we have some person to represent it, that we create some image around it. And that's where it gets particularly dangerous because now the idea is not representing itself for what it might be good, because people might like the idea and it might be like, yeah, let's follow this. They might just be following it because, oh, I like the colors, I like the scheme, I like the people. It's like, but what about the ideas? They're the very core root of the problem. I mean, even if you're just participating in regular politics, it's like, are you voting for the person or their platform? Okay, if you say their platform, that makes a lot more sense, even though in reality you're voting for an entire illusion. But at least if you can break it down like that, you'll see, okay, one is more of an illusion than the other. One is, more egoic, image based than the other. And funny enough, when people go online and they look at someone like me, I mean, what you're literally looking at is an image. It's an image. And what does that mean? You can imagine, you can think you see something, but you don't know if I'm real. At this point, you have AI and all these people going to take over the world, right? Of this illusion, this mindset of like, do I know if what I'm looking at is real? This is becoming the prevailing sentiment in the world. People not knowing what is real. We see it in health and food. It's like, is this real or is it not? Every source is contradicting each other. And then we look at people. It's like, who's going to be real and honest with me? I don't know who's real or honest. I don't know who's really authentic or being themselves. Everyone's living out some sort of persona. It's becoming more evident to people who are looking outside of everything, looking at the inside of all these people who are engaged in these personas, that there's so much illusion going on. And the fact that there's so much illusion is making more people wake up at the same time, usually through shadow work and some really dark or powerful experiences that wake them up out of the trauma, out of the shadow that they were in for so long. That shadow being that ego, that attachment, that thing that was binding them, that was keeping them away from their personal freedom and evolution or spiritual growth. And whatever word you want to use for these terms, I hope you get the general concept, because even truth itself cannot be described by words. And the materialist mind wants to say, well, let's take the truth, let's conceptualize it, let's put it into this format, and this is what the truth is. It's like, even then, even if you get all the best ideas together, even if AI can summarize all the books in the world into a simple sentence, which sounds awesome, by the way, it sounds great, but it's still not nature itself. It's still not life, and AI is just still one thing within life. So no matter how much knowledge you feed into AI, no matter how much we give into AI, it's still artificial. It's still AI. It still relies on humans and natural intelligence, and that which gives way to that very thing in the first place. And if you're not able to see the roots, you're unable to see nature. You're unable to see the spiritual or natural world before the material. Because before any man made thing could be created, like this cream, I don't know, like this essential oil, I mean, whatever it is, like this book. I mean, I can say, wow, this has so much value because I wrote it myself. It doesn't matter. Nature does not really care. It's always changing. It's like we're waves on a beach. And I'm not to say that we have no purpose or that we have no meaning in life, but to realize that you're one and part of this reality. You're not an exception to it. You're not separate from it. You're part of it. So everything you create, well, it's part of nature. Doesn't mean it's natural. Doesn't mean it's actually going to support you. Doesn't mean it's going to help you, because you and your mind will keep you stuck in your own illusions, in your own fantasies. That includes all sort of political terminology, including anarchism, including abolitionism. These are just terms or words. What are these? It's like we're just trying to look at bits and pieces, but then we attach to it. This is who I am. Because if I don't have some sort of identity to hold on to, it won't make me feel special. It won't make me feel unique. And so we have a need to do that. Now, me writing a book, obviously, it's for opening the mind and doing the things that I'm saying right here. But even then, I have to warn people and say, don't be dependent on me. Don't be dependent on the book. Because I'm trying to get back to the roots, which again goes past this materialism, even from watching a video, even from reading a book, even from taking a certain substance, because you can become dependent on it. You can believe that it's part of your reality and necessary for your reality, even more so dangerous, because you can live without it. You can find the truth without it. You can be happy without it. And actually taking things out of your life rather than adding in. And I talk about an integrative nutrition. If you want to take out a bad food in your life, you can just start adding in good foods and the bad foods will naturally get out. Well, yeah, but you have to still get rid of those bad foods. And in that process of adding in, the bad just gets out naturally. But it's the same way also the other way around. You get out the bad, all of a sudden you start adding in good because something needs to be there, unless something doesn't need to be there at all. And that requires reflection, that requires presence, because oftentimes we're trying to fill the void, trying to do something just for the sake of doing it. We're trying to be busy, we're trying to achieve the one great work, we're trying to free humanity. And maybe all our efforts of trying is also part of the problem, because it's attached to some of these notions that we can limit nature into a box or decide its fate, which is how we got to where we are in the first place, of the whole problem of why we want to escape that box. So it doesn't help to create another box. This is why it's very obvious in politics. It's like you have one politician saying, well, we'll make the system better, but they're still playing into the same system. So even the anarchists, although they're not playing in the system, they're saying our system is good. They're still labeling it. They're still saying this is how nature is. And what they have to realize, if they want to evolve past their materialist mindset, their ego-based mindset, is if anarchy is truth, then it's just nature. It's just reality. You don't need to attach to it. You don't need to make that who you are. You don't need to have all the colors and all that jazz, right? It might be fun to use it here and there lightheartedly, but say it then. Give the disclaimer of this is not the truth. This is not reality. I just do it for fun. I just do it because, it is what it is, right? Like I don't do it on purpose. I just do it because it's spontaneous. It comes naturally. And how often do people just do as nature just naturally gives to them? Or how often are people actively reaching out, trying to change or bend the will of nature, or submitting into those who are bending the will of nature? because either one of those is not going with the flow of life, it's going with the flow of man and man's creation, or what you call materialism. Okay, when I talk about man-made things and sort of recognizing the dangers of them, I'm not saying all man-made things are bad. I'm not saying all desire is bad. I'm not saying anything man is, even his thinking brain and his intellectual concepts, I'm not saying that's bad, but it's there for a reason, and there's still a balance to be obtained with all those things, because everything in nature is sort of self-regulating and self-governing of itself. And we, having the intellectual capability to sort of alter and change nature, we can end up with really drastic, harsh measures on reality, which reality will just look at us like peasants no matter what we do, because it's so much grander and more complex than we ever think that we are. It's like we think we're more than who we are. It's like, no, we're just human beings. We're just part of nature like any other animal. We think we're more, and that's part of the problem. Okay, so yes, there's a lot of new age stuff you have to navigate through. Yes, there's a lot of the opposite side of people who think, oh, well, we're not new age, so we're also spiritually enlightened, and it just gives way into the same dynamic. And if you aren't aware of where you get trapped, you aren't aware of the materialism, you aren't aware of ego. And this is the key, essentially, to, I guess you can say, true freedom, at least in my view. And I'm being honest, view, right? So you can look at money, you can look at food, and you can say these are complementary to what we actually are trying to achieve in the world. You can look at capitalism and free trade, but you have to be able to break it all down. You have to see it's like money. What does that mean? Food, what food? I mean, isn't there greater forms of food like love and attention and or not even attention, just being there for someone, present, yourself, honesty? These can be considered food, right? Sunlight, having the natural elements in your environment. People can survive off of some of these for a good amount of time. Even just quality food, not even quantity or the type. I mean, there's so many dependencies, and you can try to get really specific, but at some point you also have to be able to let go, because if you get too focused on the specifics, now you're going to start a bunch of arguments. Now you're going to get attached into certain ways of thinking, unless you're able to step back and you're able to have that perfect balance between, I'm going to seek knowledge, but also realize that in order to seek knowledge, I have to take that step back, which again goes back into my other video about the dangers of knowledge. So spiritual and moral evolution is necessary for freedom, ultimately, because freedom is a concept that deals with philosophy. And unless politics is dealing with philosophy, which it isn't, it's dealing with rituals that don't really educate the public. If it does educate the public, because self ownership is the requirement for freedom, self ownership requires rules. That's a rule. Like, I own myself, there's rules for maintaining ownership over what I am. And so, if you don't have rules, you don't have freedom. But those rules are spiritual rules or moral rules, they're philosophical rules. And those rules are ultimately guaranteed to grow within society, or they're guaranteed to become bigger and bigger, more evident, because anytime there's an illusion over those rules saying, well, there needs to be a ruler, or there needs to be some sort of material fixation, it just gets wiped out by the spiritual and moral rules that are so evident beyond them. It gets wiped out by nature, which is so beyond man-made systems. So everything we try to create, it's like, again, it's just a beach wave going down and taking out the house with it, and acting like nothing ever happened and no one ever saw it. And then a couple years go by and no one ever even remembers it. And that's the truth. So you don't get attached to things, and we'll be able to not just see within ourselves to then help others, because we're always so focused on saying, well, we need to wake up the world, we need to change things, we need to yell at the rooftops. It's like, no, 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 no. Shadow work is an individual pursuit. Truth seeking is an individual pursuit, considering the fact that you are part of truth. And it's not just your truth, of course, okay? There's a lot of people in this reality that shares our reality, but you are yourself, and you need to find yourself within your own reality. And that you may call your truth, but then you need to be able to see then the world outside of yourself as well, to not get stuck on either one. Again, a balance. And then that's where you find your sovereignty, is by finding yourself, finding out, wait, I have this ego, where is it leading me? Seeing, what am I participating in? What am I giving way to? You can never see that unless you take the step back. But if you're so stuck in that system, think about somebody who's stuck in politics for like 30, 40 years of their life. They're never going to see the fact that there's a reality outside of it. They're never going to even consider the possibilities without it, unless something drastic in their life happens. They have a spiritual awakening or something that really starts getting their gears moving away from sort of this fixated box they were in all their life. And so I ask people continually, how open is your mind? How open are you willing to be for new information? When people ask me what do I do in my life, I'm like, it's kind of hard to explain to some people. I just tell them like it is, what the preconceived notions of what people think it is, so that way they are aware and they don't make those preconceived notions to me when in that mere conversation. So that way they can start from a beginner's mind. So that way they can start with an open mind to say, okay, what you're saying makes sense. People do make these assumptions. I'm not going to make that assumption. I'm going to actually consider what you're saying. So disclaimers help a lot in this process, right? It's like, yes, you are yourself. It sounds really basic and like totally obvious, but guess what? Most people are not living by it. The obvious truths are the ones that have to be reminded century and century again because they become overlooked, overshadowed, over ego, crystallized into different illusions. And that's where it's dangerous. We have to just remind each other the simple things, or then we don't know. It's like, why are we away from the simple things? It doesn't make any sense. It's because we have these overarching illusions that are really hard to grapple with. Okay. And so it's just about trying to grapple with it, which again doesn't really require trying. It's a very paradoxical system, but that's how you create balance, is by recognizing the paradox. And so, if you're able to entertain thought, this is the mark of intelligence. When I talk to someone in politics and I question their philosophy and their morality, it's a mark of intelligence to be able to simply have that conversation, to be open to that conversation, to simply listen, to ask questions, and be willing to look into maybe some material, but more so do that nature moral reflection, which is what I'm actually looking for. I don't ask people to read my books. In fact, you probably don't see I advertise it for much on my channel. Nonetheless, I don't even advertise for money because it takes people away from the very thing that I'm trying to achieve, which is nature. We're so wrapped in the illusions that getting back to nature is seems rather difficult, although it isn't, because again, it simply is here, and all you have to do is embrace it. It's actually simpler than what people think is simple, which is just conforming to society. It's like, no, you can conform to nature, and it's still conformity, but you're conforming to the thing you know you should follow. Your conscience, your heart, you know you should follow it. So why do you go against it? That right there debunks all of politics, nonetheless, the golden rule, right? So if you're able to stand on that principle, you live it out. You live it out because you know you're on that path. And this is where knowledge is the only good, and why so much other knowledge is not really that great of knowledge because it can just lead into illusions or semantics or arguments. Like being able to look at the roots, it's nature. It was always there, the open, vast, infinite, complex world ever to understand. The imagination, the creativity, or even just the ability to let go so we can allow that creativity to manifest on its own. Because that is us looking to the night sky, curiosity and mystery. We don't know where the thoughts come from, they just come to us because we're open to it. And that allows, us to create a relationship as well, human to human. It's like being open to one another, really soul searching, some people will call it, right? I encourage that people embrace nothingness or find the emptiness or find the presence or the silence in order to contemplate these ideas or themselves. And same thing with journaling. I mean, how else could you focus on something without, with distraction? Like if I have music or too many things going on and TV and phones and I'm distracted, being pulled, I'm being swayed. There's an illusion that's trying to take hold of my conscience and my natural being, right? I need to be aware of that. And when I'm aware of that, materialism doesn't have a hold on me, right? So if you want to change minds and hearts of others, start with yourself, which is the only thing you really can change. Be the example to others naturally, but you're not trying to be something you're not. Just live your life. And if everybody lived their life, wouldn't be in mess, per se, of involuntary servitude, of government and slavery. You wouldn't have any of these problems. Okay, so regardless of the morality and the philosophical systems and these huge debates, just be yourself. Just live your own life. And are you able to do that? Or do you need to hold on to all these strings, constantly pulling onto your life, saying, I need to bring this with me? But if you want to be eternal, you need to not fear death. And death means losing everything. So you need to be ready. You need to be able to live eternally. Okay? And be able to embrace nature, which is ever changing and doesn't have those attachments like water. It just flows and navigates and takes whatever form it is taken, but it ultimately erodes at rocks. It's able to destroy massive buildings, the simplest, smallest, lowest substance. You know, we're the ordinary person. We don't need a position of power. Ordinary people, these are humble people. These are good people. We don't need to be something we're not. We're not trying to. That's the problem. So even if you're seeking the truth, you're not a truth seeker. You're just yourself. Remember that. That's all my messages on my channel. Nature is the answer. Thank you very much for watching. Take care.